You're watching Sky News, the headlines. 2 boys emerged from a cave in Thailand. 10 remain underground with their football coach. The mission to save them continues. The teams went in today to try to beat the monsoon rain, which has now started to fall. Divers from all around the world are involved in the rescue effort. We'll have the very latest from Chiang Rai. Very good afternoon to you. You can see these live pictures from Chiang Rai in Thailand. In the last few minutes, it's being reported that 2 of the 12 boys trapped with their football coach in an underground cave in Thailand have been brought out. It's unclear at the moment what physical condition they're in. The rescue effort began earlier on this morning. I think it was about 10 o'clock this morning. It was led by a team of British experts. 3 of those were flown out there for their specialist knowledge, and the boys are now being brought out by 2 divers each. Well, Sky's Alex Rossi is in northern Thailand for us now. Alex, just bring us up to date with the latest that you're being told on the ground.
Well, what we're hearing is fantastic news. 2 of the boys are now out of the cave complex, and this is some time ahead of schedule. We weren't really expecting to have this news for a good couple of hours, so they've made good progress. Remember, they've been draining those caves and the passageways for the last few days, pumping out huge amounts of water to try and make it easier for them to get out. But we think that they managed to get through the flooded parts, the bits, of course, that they would have to swim through and dive through. None of them can swim very well. None of them, it goes without saying, have dived either. A good hour or so ago, they then had a walk through the last bit of the last chambers of the caves, and now we understand they are being given medical treatment in a field hospital not far from the caves. I think that area is a place that they have cordoned off near where the international media were camped up until early this morning when we were moved down here to one of the administrative buildings for the province. So fantastic news here. It has been a very nervous wait for everybody in Thailand and everybody who's been watching this around the world. Messages of support have come in for the boys and the coach. They were found on Monday by those British divers, but now the first 2 of those boys have been brought out to safety. We think that they are in pretty good condition. They were given the all clear to make that journey. They were fit enough to do it. So they're being looked over by doctors at the moment. The expectation is that they will then be flown down to the main hospital in Chiang Rai. It's a distance of about 50 or 60 kilometres. There are, incidentally, 13 helicopters on standby, 1 for each of the team members. That's 12 boys and the football coach. Now, the fact that 2 are out already, we would expect that another 2 will hopefully arrive safely in not too long. The way it was going to work, we were told, is that 4 boys would come out at a time. Each one, there would be a little gap between them, but 4 at a time. They would be shepherded out by 13 dive experts, some of them British, international divers, and then 5 Thai divers would also help them out as well. Crucial, of course, because the Thai Navy SEALs speak their language. They are also said to have established a rapport with the boys since they first made contact with them a few days ago, and they would have also been the people who are helping them to learn to dive, providing them with pastoral care and also psychological support as well. That really is an aspect of all of this that's probably easy to overlook, the psychological difficulties that those children and the football coach would have experienced over the last few weeks, more than 2 weeks now, since they got trapped in that cave. But great news, 2 of those boys have now been brought out to safety.
OK, Alex, stay with us. I think we can show you some pictures now of an ambulance arriving at the scene there in Thailand. And presumably that ambulance will look after those who have been brought up to safety and then, as you say, will be taken to the nearest hospital about 50, 60 kilometres away. But Alex, just talk us through. Are there lots of families at the top just desperate to get a glimpse of, their loved ones who for many weeks now have been worrying whether they would make it to the surface of the cave?
Yeah, this has been, as you would imagine, a hugely difficult time for the parents of these children and the relatives as well. They have been watching what's going on here very closely. I spoke to a father of one of the children yesterday, and he was saying that he's 100% happy by the way that the sort of rescue operation, the operators have gone about this. But the evacuation bit, he said yesterday it needed to happen, and it needed to happen soon. And we've seen, of course, the governor of the province appeared here early this morning saying that, you know, this was the time to press the button. The monsoon rains were coming in. We had a bit of that earlier, an absolute deluge earlier. That's happened a few times, and it's expected to get worse as the week goes on. So they really, you know, it's critical that they got this rescue operation underway. Now, they were talking about this taking possibly, worst case scenario, 3 or 4 days. The fact that these 2 boys are out and they have made such good progress would suggest that perhaps all of them will be out quicker than anybody thought. But for the families, hugely difficult. Not clear whether all of them wanted this rescue to happen right now, because, of course, it's not entirely safe. We've been told ourselves by cave divers that it is hugely challenging, even for people who are very experienced and practiced in the art of going underwater through extremely tight spaces. And these are children. They are weakened because they've been underground for a long time. They've also been up against it psychologically, trapped. It's extremely claustrophobic inside those caves. And they're, you know, some of them have been described as weak and malnourished. 2 of the boys have been described in that condition. But this morning, an Australian doctor saw them, who also has cave diving experience. He said that they were all fit enough. They had the all clear to dive. And so the rescue operation has begun. But again, just to reiterate, a very, very nervous time for all of the families involved who are watching this very closely and hoping that all of the boys will soon arrive safely at the entrance of the cave complex.
OK, Alex, thank you. Stay where you are. We'll come back to you a bit later on. But first of all, let's bring in Peter Faulding, the founder and chief executive of Specialist Group International, a provider of specialist rescue response. It seems fantastic news. The first 2 boys brought out to safety.
Absolutely fantastic. Rescuers have done a marvellous job, and I say very brave people who have gone and done this. It's easy to sit here and just see a few pictures on TV, but the real conditions deep inside the cave that we will never see.
And you really do get a sense, looking at some of the pictures that we've seen inside the cave, of the challenging situation that they face trying to get these boys out, and it's being led by 2 British men.
Oh, it's fantastic. Real heroes, done a great job. And I think when you see the pictures, we're under floodlights. We're not seeing just these people are working from head torches, but when you're working in a flooded passage, the light has little effect because a lot of the silt's kicked up, so it's very black water to work in.
And what kind of impact will being stuck and trapped inside a cave for, 2 weeks now have had on these young boys?
Well, they've had no sunlight. It's obviously going to affect them. They're going to be very weak because they haven't used their muscles much. They might have been standing up in the cave. And oxygen deficiency, so we breathe 20.9% in their daily life. Someone was saying it's down to 15%. That is getting critically sort of low. At 8%, life is extinct. So if it had been carried on going down, plus the build-up of carbon dioxide, they could have eventually suffocated if they couldn't get them air supplies through via an airline.
And freezing cold as well, I'd imagine.
And probably they're lucky. If that had been a British cave, they potentially could have died of hypothermia. So because of the warmth out there, that's made life a bit easier, and it's generally quite warm underground.
Talk us through, because there were options, weren't there, about drilling in through this cave to try and pull them out. Why was it taken, this decision, to bring them out so suddenly and to dive them out? Because that's quite rare, isn't it?
It's probably quite rare. A lot of cave rescues happen in the UK, cave dive groups that normally don't hit the media too much. But what they've done is it was the monsoons that sparked this rescue, definitely, because if they had the children in there and they tried to take option number 2 and they all died, it would have been pretty grim.
We're just looking at some of these pictures on the screen at the moment. It looks like some kind of convoy, as you can see, going through the streets here in Thailand. This is a story that has completely captivated not only the nation, but, you know, the headlines around the world.
Yeah, it's really picking up today, isn't it? I think, yeah, it's an amazing operation. It'll go down as one of the biggest rescues in history. I think it's absolutely incredible. And so if they were left in there to actually, for 4 months while they waited for the flood water to recede, they would have been in quite a bad way, and let's say they may have eventually suffocated if they couldn't get them out.
I think we're looking at some of the ambulances now, because these boys, obviously, they will be brought to safety. We understand that 2 now have been, and then they will be rushed off to the nearest hospital, which we understand is about 50, 60 kilometres away. So they will need some Very specialist treatment.
Probably dehydrated, they'll probably need to be put up on drips and so on, and given lots of different, well, they need feeding well, and before they can probably see their parents.
What kind of other rescue operations have there been over the years that kind of compare to this one?
I think there's been a lot of cave rescues that we don't normally hit the national media so much, and these cave diving groups and the cave rescue organisations do a marvellous job. But the Chilean one was the big one that they hit the world media, what went on for months, and them guys, they could manage to drill down a large enough hole to get a capsule down to bring them back out. With this, it's so far up on the mountain, it's pretty near impossible to get the machinery up there.
I think we've got a still now of all the boys that we can show you. Of course, this is the football team, 12 of them before they ended up getting trapped in that cave, and they went in there, of course, with their football coach there in Thailand. You would think that the fact that they are a football team, young, healthy, fit lads, that has stood them in good stead.
I think it probably has. They need to be fit, and I said we need to think about the divers as well. They're fit people. They've got to be to carry out this operation. I mean, if they're going to go going backwards and forwards, that takes a lot of physical fitness to actually do that, and they're going to be very tired. They'll be drained at the end of this. It's hard work.
And some of them couldn't swim.
No, the children couldn't swim. That wasn't swimming was not a major factor, because once we got the breathing mask on, you can actually be assisted through and tell them what to do, because they're actually underwater anyway, so they're not trying to hold themselves up. So that's not too bad, but it's actually the worry of what's going to happen to you.
We're just hearing now that the third boy to be brought out is almost at chamber 1, so you would think that that rescue operation is going pretty well as well. We know that 2 have already been brought out. Looking at the picture on the screen at the moment, for these boys' parents, you can't even begin to imagine, can you?
I'm a father myself, so you know, I know what it's like. If your child's ill, it's bad enough, let alone being stuck underground as well for 2 weeks, not knowing, and especially with potential monsoons coming. It's incredible. I'd imagine on the last leg, I don't think they'd be walking out. I think they would, if they're weak, they'd be put onto a stretcher and carried out once they get into the area where it's dry. It would be a sensible move. Because
even once they've done all the diving and been brought out of the cave, there's still a mile walk, isn't there, to get back? I think so. No, I can't see the passages, but I'd imagine a body wrap stretcher is the best way to do it. Put them on that and carry them out, and that way they're not going to get injured. They're going to be too weak. And we're just looking at some of the pictures again on the screen, as you can see underground there. This has been an enormous rescue operation. We're just going to bring in our correspondent again, who's at the scene, Alex Rossi. And Alex, we're hearing that a third boy has almost reached the entrance of the cave.
That's correct, and we're also hearing that a fourth boy, remember earlier I was saying that that's how they would do it. They'd have 4 boys leaving all together, slightly staggered apart as they were taken through the tunnel complex. So of that group, the last boy is now just past chamber 3, heading towards chamber 2. Now that area, if they can walk, and of course, as your guest is saying, they may be in a weakened condition and be stretchered out, they could make it out of there on foot. So what that really means is that the dangerous bit, the bit that the authorities here and the rescue team were really worried about, the bit that they would have to be fully submerged, pushing their bodies through those tiny gaps underwater. For those first 4 boys, that is past. 2 of them, of course, are now safely in a field hospital. So that is fantastic news. And remember that it was a race against time. It really was. You could see the clouds brooding over the top of the sort of mountainous hills behind me. That's where the cave complex is. That is somewhere deep inside the bowels of that big wall of rock. That is where the other boys are still trapped. Now, we are told that the next group will go out as a 3. After that, you'll have another group as a 3, and the last group will include the coach also as a 3. But, I mean, the fact that we are now seeing the first 4 boys arriving, we think, safely. Certainly 2 of them are safely out of the caves, the other 2 just making their way through the last few meters. It tells us that the plan of action that they have in place, well, it works. We know it can be successful, so there is every hope here. Certainly it has been a nervous wait here by people who've been watching this very closely, including ourselves. There's a great deal of optimism, really, that this rescue operation will be successful.
And Alex, this is all happening far quicker than we had originally thought. I mean, we were told some of them might not come out until 9 o'clock tonight.
That's right. The first two boys were out a good couple of hours ahead of schedule. Again, it's a reflection, I think, on the expertise of the dive teams in place. There are 13 foreign divers, and there are also 5 Thai divers spearheading the mission, but there are also other divers, Thai Navy SEALs, along the routes providing ancillary support to the team that's actually spearheading the mission. But what we don't know, and what isn't clear at this stage, is just how much water they have managed to get rid of in the cave complex itself. They've been working continuously to try and pump the caves, pump that flood water out of the caves. As of yesterday, the figure that we were given was 130 million litres had been pumped out, so that the levels had gone down significantly. So we don't know how much of it they're actually having to be fully submerged to dive through, and how much of it they can just kind of swim across or be pushed across the surface or pulled across the surface by the divers who are looking after them. But it's great news. They're making quicker progress than anybody expected, and people here are keeping their fingers crossed that the other kids and the coach will be out soon and be reunited with their parents in the not too distant future.
OK, Alex, thank you. A reminder, if you are just joining us, that 2 boys have now been recovered from that cave operation in Thailand, and 2 others are apparently very close to the entrance of that cave. You can see at the moment on the screen, this is the football team who went missing, 2 weeks ago now, all 12 of them and their coach. And this rescue operation started at 10 o'clock this morning. You have divers, specialist divers from all over the world, including Britain, heading up this rescue operation. It seems so far that 2 boys have been brought out and they've been rushed to hospital for specialist treatment. As you can imagine, 2 weeks they have been stuck underground, and this rescue operation continues. Well, joining me now from Indianapolis is Amma Mirza, coordinator at the US National Cave Rescue Commission. Very good afternoon to you. It seems very positive news so far. What's your reaction?
Well, this is definitely very positive news. The fact that 2 are confirmed out and 2 more are reported to be headed out tells us that the techniques that they have using are at least successful to this point. I'm still hesitant and cautious, but it gives me even better hope for the rest of them.
Yeah, how complicated are the conditions that they're working in here?
This is incredibly complicated because you're dealing with kids who were now malnourished to begin with from the starvation. You're talking about a passage through the cave that is very slippery and muddy and rocky on the places you can walk. The kids have to be swum across several of the places, and then they have to be dived through some of the tightest places that most of your listeners probably can't even imagine. You have to take your equipment off. The kids weren't wearing the equipment except for their regulators, but the divers have to take their equipment off through some of those places and push it ahead of them. And this is in all total blackout environments. Most people would just freak out just by being in the blackout environment, even if they weren't in the enclosed space.
Will this go down? I mean, we've seen cave operations over the years. Will this go down as one of the biggest and the most significant rescue operations that we've seen?
Yes, it will. And actually, we at the NCRC are looking for the reports that come out of this that detail the operation in the kind of detail that we would use to analyze it for inclusion in some of our training curriculums and the lessons learned. But it will certainly, and especially if this is completely successful, this will be one of the greatest cave rescues that I have ever heard of.
There were different options, weren't there? They were thinking of drilling a hole down. They were thinking of keeping, the kids in there for months to build up their strength. Do you think this was the right decision to take, to bring them out as soon as possible and to dive them out?
Well, it's the right decision now because of the exigencies of the moment. With the rain coming in, they'd spend a lot of time pumping the water down. And if they lost that ground again, then they lost this option. But further, what made it more of an attractive option was the fact that if the rains came up and the area that the boys were in was inundated, then the only other option there at that point would have been drowning. And so I'd rather have even a slim chance than a guaranteed chance of death. I'd rather have a slim chance of survival. So that, combined with the fact that the air in the cave was getting stale, the oxygen levels were lowering, the carbon dioxide levels are raising, meant that the long-term option was probably not going to be feasible. The drilling option was also long-term because it was going to take weeks to months if they even could find the point where they could hit the cave. So yes, now the diving option is the best option. And even if it does not turn out 100% positive, it's still the best option. And they made the best decision that they could with the information that they had.
OK, I think we've got some pictures of ambulances arriving in Thailand at the scene that we can show you now. And of course, those ambulances there, as part of this operation, it's unclear who's in them, but you would imagine that they are there to help those who come out of the cage when they're rescued, being taken to hospital, which is about 50, 60 kilometres away from the cave entrance. We'll bring you the very latest on the updates there. But Anwar, if you're still there, just talk us through what will these parents be going through. I mean, it's impossible to imagine, but you would think they are there at the entrance waiting for their kids to hopefully come out.
Well, of course, the ones whose kids have not come out yet, they've got even increased anxiety now because there's hope combined with fear at the same time that's heightened to a level that it has not been before. They've gone through the elation, a few days ago when the kids were found that they were still alive, which was wonderful. But what they came to realize very quickly was what those of us who are experienced in cave rescue realized almost immediately, is that now the really hard part begins.
Yeah, it's a complete emotional roller coaster, you'd imagine, for the friends and family of those children. And the fact that they managed to survive in there for so long, are you surprised by that?
No, I'm not. It was a warm cave environment. Hypothermia was not the consideration, which is one of the biggest things that would kill people in a long-term cave environment, especially a wet one. They had water to drink, and as long as the water wasn't going to make them sick, they could survive for 3 or 4 weeks, potentially. The human beings can live for quite some time without food as long as they have water. Now, they're not going to be healthy, and the road to recovery, the physical road to recovery, is going to be a long one. But I was giving them at least a couple of weeks before it became an absolute critical problem.
And how hygienic would it have been in those caves?
Not very, because you're talking about flood water that's coming in, and it's washing all sorts of pollutants and toxins into the cave, as well as the animal and human waste. So my understanding is that the kids were often using the water that was dripping into the cave, which tends to be a lot cleaner than the flood water itself.
And now that these 2 boys have been taken out, we understand they've been rescued, what kind of rehabilitation process will they be put through?
Well, they still, of course, need to, they're only just beginning the process of refeeding them and gaining them proper nutrition. They need to be very carefully monitored as far as their diet and how they're eating. They're going to, long-term, the muscles will rebuild fairly quickly. When you go through starvation, the body starts to cannibalize itself. It starts with the muscles and the connective tissues, but tendons and ligaments take a long time to rebuild. The minerals that were depleted out of the bones make the bones weaker. So these things, these kids will see the effects of this pretty much for the rest of their lives. But they should make a full recovery, assuming that there's no other issues involved.
OK, Anwar Mirza, thank you for your time. I'm joined by Peter Faulding, who's the founder and chief executive of the Specialist Group International. He's here with us in the studio, watching the pictures, which are absolutely incredible when you see, it brings it all to life, doesn't it?
It's really good news. Fantastic. It's nice to see the first 2 out, and we know there's others on the way out now. And just to be a parent, sitting there watching it, waiting for the news, and it's all good news, and that gives hope to the other children that are going to be brought out. And I think the great thing is these rescuers have taken their time to pump the water out. So if they rushed in 4 days ago, the situation may have been a lot more, the outcome may have been worse, but because they've managed to get the water levels a lot lower, cleared the passages a bit more, it'll make the job easier, although still very difficult to get them out.
Yeah, I mean, 2 boys out. We understand 2 more close to being out. And if you look at the pictures on the screen at the moment, just talk us through what they're doing here. Well,
at the moment, on the pictures I can see, they're getting the staging the equipment. I'm not sure they got their airlines. Now, that's interesting. And whether they're going to be running airlines in for what they call surface demand diving equipment, where they'll be breathing through a hose pipe, or they'll be wearing cylinders on their side. That's going to be an interesting one. That air hose may have been used to actually pump air into the chamber, so they may have run an air line from an external compressor and basically pump compressed air in to keep the oxygen levels up to save it depleting within the chamber itself.
And the pictures at the moment, I mean, it's well lit in there at the moment, but of course that is for the purposes so they can see what's being done. But when these divers are going through this painstaking work, how challenging is it?
Oh, it's a massive challenge. Physically for these people, I mean, it's interesting to note the British cave divers will be wearing their cylinders on their side. The Thai divers, because they won't have the purpose-built rig, they're wearing them on their back. So they're not used to diving in caves, but brilliant divers, but not used to diving in caves. With the cave divers, this is what they do all the time. So there's a big difference there. So I think the Brit cave divers, and I think the ones from Australia, will probably be leading the operation to actually get through to the children, where the Thai divers will be their backup system. And you can see how dangerous it was when, unfortunately, 2 days ago, the Navy diver lost his life, and that shows how severe it is.
Indeed, and these 2 British divers, they're volunteers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then they just get called upon for their expertise.
That's right, all the time. I mean, the Cave Rescue Organisation in England is a marvellous organisation, all volunteers, a bit like Mountain Rescue, and they respond. People get lost in caves. There's very few cave divers around. It's such a dangerous sport, and it is so specialist. They say you can train a caver to become a cave diver, but not the other way round. It's very, very specialist, and not many people would like it.
And one of them, a former fireman,
yeah,
the other
right.
in
Stanton,
Nottingham.
that's right.
And the Bristol-based guy, John, he's an IT consultant. So I'd imagine you need a very, very cool head under pressure.
Oh, absolutely. It would get one failure on your equipment underwater. There's not much backup. I mean, what they do, they carry cylinders with different regulators, and they work on a system. They go in with a third of air, and they'll leave a third to go in, a third to come out, and a third as a reserve, just in case it goes wrong. But if one piece of equipment fails, there is nowhere to go, and that's why a lot of cave divers have lost their lives over the years.
We're just hearing, actually, from AFP that the Defence Ministry spokesperson has said that they are expecting 4 boys to come out pretty soon. We hope that is the case. We will keep an eye on that. And if you're just joining us, 2 boys have been brought out of the cave here in Thailand and will now be taken to hospital for treatment. Of course, they've been stuck under there for 2 weeks now, in the cave with the rest of their football team, so 12 of them in total, plus their coach. And they've been trapped in this cave in the most horrendous of conditions, as you can imagine, incredibly dark, very, very narrow passageways. And so this rescue operation is crucial. They've been deciding and discussing how to go about that for the last few days or so. They were considering drilling into the cave to try and bring them up that way. But it was decided, because of the awful monsoon weather that was forecast, to bring them out as soon as possible. And they've been trying to, pull as much water out of the caves as possible. You can see the awful weather there in Thailand at the moment. It is monsoon season, and that inevitably has hampered this rescue operation somewhat. But we are hearing the very positive news that 2 boys have been brought out of that cave now, and 4 more seem to be very close to the entrance of the cave. But this is an incredibly difficult rescue operation. There are very narrow passageways, and British divers are heading up the effort there, along with the Thai Navy SEALs and other divers from around the world. They've brought in many specialists, haven't they?
From all over, from the US as well. And I mean, if you go back a bit and look at the effort to drill, just look at the size of that mountain. You couldn't get the equipment up there. They would have to create a road just for the drilling rig. So I think that option was in a far distance away. I don't think it would have worked. It would have been a long process, maybe months, long time to do that. But this is the best option, what they've got. And you can see they're wearing the full face mask. So the face mask they're actually wearing in the pictures, they're called positive pressure masks that we wear, so the water won't actually get into the mask. The pressure inside the mask keeps the water out, similar to what a firefighter wears, positive pressure. And you can see them obviously carrying bits and pieces through the caves there, and these are obviously their assistants. The critical bit for this is to keep that line. If they lose that lifeline that is run through to where the children is, that can be a disaster. So they would have put a very, very secure line to make sure it couldn't get cut. If they lose that lifeline, they can get lost in the cave system.
OK, thank you. We'll be back with you in a few moments because we're going to cross back to Thailand now. And our correspondent Alex Rossi, who is there. And Alex, we are hearing now that 4 boys among the group of 13 trapped are now at the base of this cave and could be very close to the entrance now.
Yeah, I mean, it's all happened much more quickly than anybody thought. We were certainly expecting, well, that was what we were told by the governor of this province this morning, that it wouldn't happen for a few hours. But here we are hearing this extraordinarily good news that these boys are now coming out, and they are coming out safely. So this is really fantastic news. It's been a very nervous wait for everybody here. Everybody in Thailand has been watching this extremely closely, as many people have through around the world. So this is fantastic news, and it also tells us, of course, that the method that they have put in place for extracting these boys, for evacuating them from where they have been inside this cave complex for more than 2 weeks, well, it works. The plan works, and it is working, and there's no reason to think that it won't continue to work. Now, we are also hearing as well, Becky, that the water levels in the cave, remember, only a few days ago, the cave was terribly badly flooded. There was one stretch a few days ago, more than 800 metres long, that you'd have to dive through. Well, much of it now has been reduced, so bits that they would have had to have previously dived through, they can swim across or be pushed or pulled across by the dive buddies looking after them. And then there are other stretches that they can now walk through. So we are hearing that those boys, some of them they've passed through the difficult bit, and they are now walking out. They will be given, we understand, a medical check-up in the cave if they need sort of immediate care, a drip or something like that. They can be given it there. They'll then be taken to a field hospital, and there are 13 helicopters on standby, 1 for each boy, 12 boys, and the football coach, ready to, when they are well enough, whisk them down. Once they've been dealt with in the sort of triage system, whisked down to the main hospital in Chiang Rai, some distance, about 50 or 60 kilometres, where they will be given sort of full medical support and all of the care that they need. But we're still waiting, of course, on what happens to the other boys. The plan was that 4 of them would come out initially, staggered, not too far apart, but 4 would be brought out. Then they'd do another group, a group of 3 boys, another group of 3 boys, and then the last 2 boys and the coach. They were talking about this happening 2, 3, possibly even taking as long as 4 days, worst case scenario. But perhaps this is an indication that it'll all be done much more quickly, and we will have the good news that all of the boys have been brought out safely. Of course, we still have to wait for that. Only a few of them, 4 of them so far, have been brought out.
And Alex, it's impossible to imagine what the families have gone through, because over the last couple of weeks, a complete emotional roller coaster for them.
Yeah, extremely difficult. Remember, for the best part of 10 days or perhaps a bit longer, they didn't know whether these boys and the football coach were alive. The rescue teams or the search teams had gone into the caves looking for them. The place that they originally thought that they would be found, Pattaya Beach, they weren't there. That area was flooded. And it wasn't until that British team got in there and found them on Monday that they discovered that they were alive. Now, that, of course, brought with it massive euphoria, but then that was very quickly contrasted, I suppose, with the practical realities, the logistical difficulties of getting these children out of that cave complex. Cave divers that we have talked to have described it as seriously difficult in terms of skill level. It's right at the end of anybody's ability, even if they have mastered the art of cave diving and have been doing it for many, many years. It is that difficult, it is that challenging. And of course, these kids, they can barely swim. Some of them can't swim at all. It goes without saying that they can't dive. Not only that, but they are in an environment where they haven't known whether it's night or day. Their diurnal clock has been completely disrupted. They haven't had any food for most of the time that they've been in there. It's only really since Monday that they've had any proper supplies. 2 of them at least were described, and the coach, in a weakened condition and malnourished. They've managed to give them some food and build them up a little bit, enough to make this journey. They were given the all clear by the medics, but extremely claustrophobic in there. Yesterday, of course, we had the good news and massively brilliant news for the families. I spoke to one father yesterday who was absolutely ecstatic when he got the handwritten note from his son, as did the other parents, saying that, you know, he was well, he was fine. Not to worry, Mum and Dad. Prajak's note said, this is the boy who was in there. I love you, Mum and Dad. And that was heartwarming stuff. But of course, the reality is he's still trapped inside the cave. It's one thing getting a letter out, but it's another thing getting your son out safely. But hopefully all of the boys will be out, reunited with their families very soon.
OK, Alex, thank you. You can see some live pictures now on the scene. This is from Chiang Rai Hospital, which is where we understand that these boys are being taken to. We know that 2 have now been brought out, and they are likely to be taken to this hospital for further treatment. As you can imagine, a long period of rehabilitation for them now. Let's talk now to Harry Long, the former rescue controller for the Upper Wharfdale Fell Rescue Association. He's on the line. Good afternoon to you, Harry. We're looking at pictures of the most incredible scenes here and what is a very, very difficult rescue operation.
Yes, I think that you've undoubtedly used exactly the right expressions to describe it there, and it's on a vastly larger scale to the rescue operation that I oversaw in 1992 in the Yorkshire Dales.
What kind of rescue operations, then, does this compare to that we've seen around the world in the past?
Very, very few, actually, certainly of this magnitude. The one I referred to, there were only 2 men involved, and it was somewhat easier because perhaps they were more mature in their approach to things, and they, in fact, were more amenable, I think, to the idea of perhaps having to dive out, where they had matters in their own hands rather than being dependent on what happened with the weather over the forthcoming days in that particular instance.
We're looking at some pictures at the moment from Thai television. These show the local hospital. I think we're hearing from Reuters that some boys have been taken and transferred by helicopter. As you can imagine, for these boys who've now been brought to safety, there would be a long rehabilitation period.
I imagine that's going to be the case. I also think, though, that youngsters are likely to be more resilient to those sort of experiences than perhaps more older people will be. And it means perhaps that they will bounce back to normal sort of ways of living very, very quickly.
Do you think this was the right decision to make? Because they were thinking about drilling down into the cave. There were various scenarios that they could have taken. Why did they decide on this one? And do you think that was right? Well,
first of all, I don't think they had much choice. The surface terrain was of the kind that would prohibit any sort of idea of drilling down from above. Also, the depth that they would have to have drilled down to would have taken a very lengthy period of time. I think the other idea of waiting to see whether the water dropped on its own before the monsoon hit, that was a bit hit and miss. And at the end of the day, with the onset of this early rain that I gather there was there over the last 24 hours, it virtually decided for them which option to go for, which is in some ways similar to what happened in 1992 in the Dales, the rescue I was involved with.
Cave diving in the UK is a very niche and very small sport, so I imagine you know both John and Rick, who are out there heading up this operation.
Yes, indeed. I mean, the caving community as a whole, at the top end of it, is pretty tight-knit, and most people know each other. If they don't know them personally, they certainly know them by reputation. And, of course, in this instance, you've got 2 of the best from the UK mixing in with some of the best from other countries around the world.
OK, thanks ever so much for sharing those details with us. We are looking, as I say, at live pictures from Chiang Rai in Thailand. On the screen at the moment, this is the hospital, which is where we imagine these boys are going to be taken to. We're hearing from Reuters news agency that the boys have been brought to safety so far, have been transferred there by helicopter. As you can imagine, they've been trapped underground in this cave for 2 weeks now with little light, and they have had to be trained to dive out of this cave. We were told that it was a rescue operation that would take many, many hours, but it seems to have been somewhat quicker than we were imagining and anticipating. But so far, 2 boys have been brought to safety, and we're hearing that others are very close to the entrance. We will keep you abreast of the situation as and when we get it. But I'm joined by Peter Faulding, who is our expert here today. As you look at these pictures, just talk us through the kind of planning that has had to go into such a complex and dangerous operation?
Well, the planning would have taken place, when they first went missing, the start, but nobody knew where they were until the 2 British divers found them. And then we made that decision on, can we drill down? Pretty near impossible. And then we look at how long it's going to take these people to get out. A long, long process. So the planning is that we got to get air cylinders into them. It's staged. But I think over the last few days, they pumped so much water out that it's made the operation a lot easier for them. Although very difficult, it's benefited them so they could get further into the cave with low levels of water and get more equipment in.
We're just hearing we are expecting there to be a government press conference in the next few moments or so we'll keep an eye out for that. But let's not forget, of course, that this operation has been huge scale, and one person, very sadly, lost their life, one of the divers.
That's correct, yeah. Unfortunately, cave diving is a high-risk operation, and unfortunately there will be fatalities. And these guys who were doing the cave diving, initially the Navy divers were not cave divers. They were brilliant divers, but unfortunately that's the risk of the job. And let's hope, cross our fingers now with the lower water levels, that all the children can be brought through the sumps safely. And now it's good. It's looking good very good at the moment. But I think give it a few more hours, like the other people said, the monsoons come, then it would have been a totally different ending, I think.
Lots of people do diving, but cave diving is very niche, and it's an incredibly dangerous sport. How does it differ?
It's highly dangerous because you've got no way out. The cylinders they're wearing on their sides, there's very few people that do it in the UK. It's murky, it's dark, and if these people go into passages, there's people around the world that are still in caves that have never come out. Their bodies are still in there. It's that bad. They can't be got out. And they swim in, there's nowhere to turn around until they get to another chamber. They are literally swimming in the dark, for exploration to find other parts of the cave system. It's absolutely incredible, and it's very, very high risk, and they know that.
OK, another update that we're getting from the Defence Ministry spokesperson that 2 more boys are expected out shortly. Again, we're showing you a still of the boys that went into that cave, 2 weeks ago, along with their football coach. All 12 of those boys, they've been trapped for a long, long time. 2 of them taken by helicopter to the nearest hospital, 60 kilometres away from that cave. Will it help that they are a strong, fit group of lads, football players? Will that help in
it certainly will do, yes, absolutely. And I think their team would have been keeping their spirits up. I mean, they've been writing letters to mum and dad. They're now looking forward to seeing mum and dad. And like your previous speaker said, kids are more resilient. And I don't think they'll be in a bad way. Oxygen deficiency will cause a problem, but it won't cause them a long-term problem. I think they just need some good nutrition now, and they'll be happy, and say kids bounce back very quickly. And psychologically, will it affect them long-term? I don't know, but I think they'll look at it and they'll see themselves appearing on the media and everything else, and they probably quite enjoy it once they're out safely.
Yeah, I'm not sure their parents will feel the same, because for them it's been, this emotional rollercoaster.
Yeah.
And you'd imagine they're standing at, the entrance to that cave, waiting to see their son.
For the parents, it would be absolutely horrible. But there's light sort of at the end.
What is this on the screen at the moment? Just talk us through that.
Well, that looks like iodine they're putting onto wounds, potential wounds. It's an iodine substance to keep infection out, so they'd be putting that on. And just where they may have got, walking across the rocks, they may have scuffed their feet slightly. And obviously it's warm. If it's warm down there and damp, then the risk of infection increases. So it looks like an iodine solution that they're just putting on them, just to keep infection out, what they use in theatre.
And over the last few days since they've been found, they've taken in supplies, they've brought out notes so the boys can share those notes with their parents, telling them that they love them, that they're fine, no need to worry. But it's one thing bringing out notes and taking in food, but bringing out, a boy, their son, is a completely different matter.
Well, that's why we have faith in the experts who are out there. They're doing a brilliant job, and they would have planned this meticulously. Everyone was thinking, it's going to take another few days. Everything was planned. They got the military out there as well. And there were so many people involved in this operation. It's not just thought of on the cuff. It was very, very carefully planned. They knew exactly when they were going to push the button, and that's what they've done, and it's worked. so far.
Live shots here of the hospital, which I imagine in the next few days will then become the focus of media attention as the boys go through their recovery process and are taken there. We know that 2 have been helicoptered to that hospital for treatment, which is 50 kilometres away from the cave. What kind of treatment and rehabilitation will they now go through?
I think psychologically, they'll be psychologically assessed once they get medically assessed. You know, I'm not a doctor, but if you put yourself in that position, I think it's that just freedom. You're out, and it's quite, you know, once you've seen mum and dad, then you're happy, and all the rest goes to the back, I think. I mean, I think, like I said, the kids are resilient, and I don't think that they'll probably be writing books about it one day themselves, but it's an incredible... They're out alive, and that's the main thing.
They said this was going to take, what, 2 to 4 days. We never expected them to come out this quickly. Do you think some of the weaker boys might take a bit longer?
No, I don't think. I think they would have prioritised. I think the weaker ones should have come out first. The strong ones will stay. You prioritise your weak ones first. Get them out straight away. That's probably why they've been flown to hospital. That would have been 60 kilometres, a very short flight for them by helicopter, rather than take them on bumpy roads. Yeah, that's the reason. I think that's just get them in.
So how long do you think until hopefully they get to the final boys?
Do you know what? It wouldn't surprise me if they're all out by midnight tonight, the way they're operating at the moment. That's what they're probably aiming for, because the monsoons, they're starting to come down. They cannot risk that deluge of water going back into the cave. I think it'll be a constant shuttle run now to get them in and out. And I think if the caves were completely flooded, as they were a few days ago, this would be a different story, totally different. And what you see in the film, they're using a Kango hammer to open the passage out. You see them drilling there just to make the entrance a bit wider. A few days ago, that would have been totally submerged, where it would have been totally different. You can't, the type of power tools you can use are totally different underwater than above water. So they've been widening the area potentially so they can get stretchers through. And I think they will be carried out the last few 100 metres. It will be easier just to put them on a stretcher, wrap them, and they can manoeuvre them in and out as they want to. Far safer for the children.
I mean, it's hard to do justice to how difficult the conditions are. I mean, one of the British divers who was the first on the scene, one of the rescuers, they were the first voices that these boys heard, and it was really touching to see the video. But they described in an email, these British divers, who are the best in the world, that it was a gnarly dive. So for 12 kids...
Yeah, you just imagine that diver has appeared in that chamber. He's now got to get back safely. He's just swam all that distance. They were talking about 4 hours. He's now got to turn around and go all the way back to deliver that news. That's an incredible feat of human endurance. It really is. And literally taking his diving set off and getting through. Then they've got to make a plan of, are these kids OK? Do we need to get them out? They've even got to go back to get them food and water. So the first dive through wouldn't have delivered water. It would have just been check. I've just found them. He would have been carrying no food supplies because it was finding out where they were.
We're just looking at some of the pictures now on the screen, and you can see, I mean, it's almost incredible that we can see these pictures of them underground, all on a head cam.
I think, that's what he's done. He's probably taken a head cam in with him, filmed these, and you can see them in the reflective blankets there. That obviously keeps the bottom.
I'm just going to bring you a bit of breaking news from Reuters news agency that 6 boys have now been brought out of the cave. They've exited the cave along with a senior member of the medical team. So 6 out of the 12, and then obviously you've got the football coach, but, you know, that's a significant number already out. Yeah,
and we said probably by midnight. It's probably going to be before that now, I think, with the water levels lower. That would be fantastic. Wouldn't surprise me by now, saying that probably by 5 o'clock they may all be out.
Yeah, so that news coming from a senior member of the medical team that 6 boys are out. What do you think we can expect to see now then? I
think probably in the next 2 or 3 hours, I think they'll all be out. I think that's what we're looking at. I don't think it'll be midnight. I think it'll be probably by 5, 6 o'clock tonight. They'll all be out just before the rain arrives.
So that's half of the team out. Just talk us through the expertise that these divers have. That, you know, some of them are volunteers, aren't they? Flown out there for what they know.
Most cave divers, you know, they are volunteer divers. You know, we get paid to dive. These are volunteers. They do it at their weekends for exploration. Fantastic. You know, I grew up as a kid with my dad exploring caves and disused mines. I dive professionally, but what they do, diving in caves, is you normally a caver first, then you train as a diver. They would. Just caving is bad enough, and you know, like I said, there are people trapped in caves to this day where they've had to leave their bodies, where rescuers actually can't get them out. But once caving's bad enough, but then when you put diving equipment on and submerge yourself in a tiny space, that's more difficult. And I say there is no way out in a cave. If your demand valve fails or you have a failure, you can switch your regulator over your demand valve, but once the air runs out and you're trapped, there is no way. You're going to die and wait for somebody to recover your body. OK, just an update if you are just joining us. You can see live pictures here from Chiang Rai province in Thailand, where half of the football team have now been taken out of that cave. 6 members, those boys, have been brought to safety, and that is from a senior medical expert telling Reuters news agency at the very latest, and they're being taken to that hospital. 2 have already been taken, we know, by helicopter, where they will be given, you'd imagine, psychological assessment and treatment as they now undergo their rehabilitation. This rescue effort started about 10 o'clock this morning. It's happened a lot quicker than we'd first anticipated, and it's being led by a couple of British divers who are volunteers, but they're flown all over the world when things like this happen for their expertise. They previously carried out rescues in the likes of France, Mexico, and now, as you can see, they are in Thailand. But we know that 6 boys have now left the cave. That's from a senior member of the rescue team. We're just watching the pictures here live from Thailand. I'm going to bring back in Peter Faulding, who is our expert here, and we're talking about these rescuers who are sent out there, got to make their game plan. The 2 Brits have gone out, Rick and John, Bristol and Nottingham. How will their experience from these rescues in the past help them decide what they need to do this time round? Oh, experience is everything in this world. You know, they've gone there with the total knowledge what they need to do to get these children out. The problem for them was, where are they in this cave system? They're expert divers, but it was actually finding them. They could have been swimming around in that cave for weeks. There'd be passages leading off. Which passage do I actually go down? And that was where it was just, maybe the kids may have left some evidence on the floor that they found in the submerged passage, but they would have just been swimming down one passage at a time, checking, and then suddenly popped up in a chamber, and lo and behold, there's a load of children there. Incredible.
I mean, it sounds like an incredibly naive question, but, you know, it's very difficult to understand how you can become quite so trapped and so embedded inside the cave system when, you know, you were just there for a day out. I
think what they've done, like all children, the coach has obviously taken them in there. They've moved into the cave, and then the floods have started to come in. The passage, the water's risen, and they now can't get out. And as the water rises, they've gone further and further into the cave to find refuge there, and that's where they've stayed until now they've been located. So that's the reason. They just went in for escaping the floodwater.
Were you surprised that they were found there alive in the first place?
I was surprised, yeah. They were somewhere. I thought they may have perished, you know, within the floodwaters, but lucky enough, and probably that they had an adult with them as well, was just kept them going. I mean, did they have torches, you know, at the time? I think they probably did, to go into the cave. But again, as the light levels go down, they probably have had to rely on one torch and just save the others, save your energy, basically. But it's incredible that they are alive, yeah. It's
incredible because, you know, all around the world, football teams, sports teams go on trips abroad, and to think that it's resulted in this, and now their pictures from deep inside that cave are being portrayed all around the world. But
this is amazing, and this will be used for training people in the future and response to this type of emergency. So everybody will learn from this operation, and that them skills will be taken elsewhere in the world should it ever happen again.
Right, well, if you are just joining us, we are covering live the rescue operation in Chiang Rai province in Thailand. You can see on your screen at the moment, these are ambulances. We don't know who's in them, but we imagine they're being used as part of this rescue effort. 2 children were taken out of the cave earlier on. They were flown by helicopter to the local hospital about 50 or 60 kilometres away from the cave entrance. And we are now being told this breaking news that 6 children have been taken out of the cave and they will be taken for medical treatment. As you can imagine, their rehabilitation will take some time. They'll be psychologically assessed. They will need to get better and recuperate in hospital 60 kilometres away from the cave entrance. And we are now being told this breaking news that 6 children have been taken out of the cave and they will be taken for medical treatment. As you can imagine, their rehabilitation will take some time. They'll be psychologically assessed. They will need to get better and recuperate in hospital. But the world's attention has been on this search and rescue effort over the last 2 weeks or so. They've been stuck underground in this cave, like I say, for 2 weeks, deep, dark caves with very, very narrow tunnels. And so there has had to be a serious operation to get the best divers, cave divers from all around the world. We now know that 2 Brits are among them, heading up this rescue effort. And they were trying to decide the best way possible to carry out this rescue effort, whether it was drilling down into the cave itself, whether it was keeping the boys in there for a few months before the water subsided. But time was not on their side. The monsoons came in and they decided that they had to act as soon as possible. And that is why now this operation is taking place. It started at 10 o'clock this morning. It was a lot quicker than we had anticipated. We thought that we would start seeing some boys rescued by about 9 o'clock tonight, but it's all happened in the last hour or so. And as I say, Reuters news agency reporting now that 6 boys have been brought out of that cave. You can see these pictures on the screen at the moment. They're putting iodine on the boys' feet, presumably some scratches and bruises, but they all do seem and appear to be in good and well enough health. They're young boys. A football team who 2 weeks ago went on a trip to Chiang Rai province and found themselves trapped in that cave. There they are, they're still with them and their coach, and never in their wildest imagination did they think that something like this would happen. This has been a huge rescue operation over the last 2 weeks or so. There were, feelings of jubilation across Thailand when they found the boys. And I think we can show you now some pictures of Thai television, some ambulances there. This all unfolding live. Helicopters, we know that the 2 boys taken out first were taken to the local hospital 50 or 60 kilometres away from where all this is unfolding. But dramatic scenes there in Thailand and very jubilant scenes as we now know that 6 people, 6 young boys, have left that cave. They've been taken to safety and they will now be treated. We are bringing the very latest coverage here on this Thai rescue mission. Like I say, 6 people have been rescued so far, 6 of those young boys, and they'll then be taken to hospital. There are 6 more stuck in the province. Don't go away. We're going to take a short break now, but after this break, we'll bring you the very latest on the effort.